We're going to continue with our study on the Sermon on the Mount. So we will do this on Sunday nights, at least probably through July. We'll kind of see where we're at, end of July, August, somewhere in there, and then move on from there. A couple of things to just kind of remind you of. We talked a little bit about this last week. But Sermon on the Mount is found in the Gospel of Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It parallels what we call the Sermon on the Plain, which is found in the Gospel of Luke. That's Luke 6 and 30, 17 through 30 or so, 17 through 40. Some people think that there are two different sermons, and that would be me. I fall in that category. I think Jesus preached the same message in different locations. Some would think it was the same sermon that was given by two different accounts of two different men that were perhaps there or witnessed it. Luke, of course, would have done the research on it, and perhaps that was the research that he learned. That's not one of those things that matters. It's just one of those things that as we study the Synoptic Gospels that we want to kind of keep stuff in perspective as to what possibly happened. Is there a conflict because one's on the mount and one's on the plain? And I would say no, not at all, because it is possible they were two different sermons. It is possible they were just written from two different perspectives. The sermons are a little bit different as far as what they emphasize. What were a couple of things that Matthew is emphasizing? I want to remind us of that. What are some of the big pieces that Matthew emphasizes in his account of the Sermon on the Mount? So Jesus is king, so he is emphasizing the kingdom. So matter of fact, we'll see that in tonight's stuff again about the kingdom. What else is important about remembering from the Gospel of Matthew? Who was it written to? Jews. So it was written to the Jews. So because of that, there's going to be some different emphasis on some of the things about prophecy, some of the things about law, which again we're going to look at. We'll run into some of that in tonight's lesson. What else about, well, there was one interesting thing about Luke's account. Luke really emphasized the downtrodden, the poor. He emphasized the position of women in the group of believers that there as he wrote. So anyway, there's just some differences important for us to notice as we study the Sermon on the Mount. So we looked at most of the Beatitudes last week, and the way that I have been studying this this sermon this time through is by taking a look at our choices. And as you think about our choices and we look at what Jesus is teaching, we'll see that over and over again Jesus is saying, here's what you need to be choosing. Choose this. Choose this lifestyle. Choose this attitude. So we looked at the Beatitudes with that in mind. So the first one was choose humility. So blessed are the poor in spirit. Choose humility. The second one, blessed are those who mourn. So choose godly sorrow. Don't just choose to be sad. Choose godly sorrow. Number 3, choose controlled strength, which is the meaning of the Greek word there, translated as gentle in the New American Standard. Some of your translations will say meek, but it is this idea of a controlled strength. Number 4, choose the right meal. So we choose to hunger and thirst after righteousness. Number 5, choose mercy. And Jesus just simply says, blessed are the merciful. That's about as far as we got last week. Number 6 is choose purity. So number 6, he says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So we choose purity here. Obviously, Jesus here is talking about purity of the inner man. He's not talking about whether we are clean or dirty physically. He's talking about purity of the heart. A couple verses for us to look at. Turn over to Matthew chapter 15. We're actually going to be in Matthew 15 a couple times tonight. Matthew 15 verse 1. And I think this is the kind of stuff that Jesus is talking about as he talks about us being pure in heart. Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus. Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders, for they don't wash their hands when they eat bread? So what are they concerned with? The flesh, washing your hands. And Jesus turns to them and replies in verse 3, and why do you yourselves transgress the commandment of God for the sake of your traditions? Again, Jesus flips it on them, addresses them from the spiritual point of view and not from the physical. And then he will talk more about the traditions of men and how that they have negated the Word of God because of the traditions that they want to keep. The physical stuff that they want, they've actually negated the Word of God by doing that. So Jesus here, when he talks about being pure in heart, it is about the inner man, our integrity, the purity of our minds, the things that we think about, the way that we act, and the way that we respond. Also, if you would, turn over to Matthew 23. Matthew 23, verse 15. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, you say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing. Whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. Throughout these 8 woes, which actually start back, I should have started back in verse 13, he again is making this contrast of they were not pure of heart. They were interested in legalism. They were interested in keeping all of the dots and all the little pieces of the law, and they had missed the heart. It was a hard issue with them. Any comments about any other verses? There are tons of them, but any other verses come to mind anybody like to share right now?
In the Philippians, where it says, like, whatever's pure and holy, think of those.
That's right. Think of these things. Philippians 4:8. Whatever's pure, whatever's holy, whatever's lovely, dwell on these. The Greek word there is pretty strong. It isn't just that it's a passing thought. It's spend some time, dwell on these things, abide in them. Great verse there from Philippians 4. As we think about being pure in heart, can the same action be seen differently by God? Can you do one thing and I do the same thing? God be pleased with your action and God be not so pleased with my action. Is that a possibility?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We understand that, don't we? I'm not real sure the Pharisees understood that. Again, we're going to look a little deeper at that because Jesus is going to address them directly here shortly on the Sermon on the Mount. Consider the fulfillment on this earth as well as the eternal. As you look at the promise that is given to the pure in heart, for they shall see God. We think about the fulfillment on this earth. How are we able to see God as we live? Before we die, how are we able to see God? Yeah. We're able to see God here first. We're able to see God in creation. If our mind is right, if I'm realizing God is the creator, He has originated all this stuff. I am able to see Him. I'm able to see Him in the lives of our brothers and sisters because of the heart that we see. I think about the work day yesterday. April and I were with grandbabies and we missed all the fun here in Durant. We had lots of fun with the kids, but that again that's an example of purity of heart. I thought our worship service this morning was absolutely stellar. There was I don't know if y'all noticed, there was just a feel this morning. I don't know how to explain it. The singing was spectacular. I mean, it was good. It was everybody seemed to be in a good mood. There was just almost an electricity in the congregation this morning. And man, it's the love of God just interacting. What did you say?
I said, that's why we didn't have any at home. It was all
Oh yeah, I forgot. Y'all were energy-less. We stole it all. That's right. So there is a fulfillment on this earth, as well as an eternal one. So it will only be those that are pure in heart that will get to actually see God in that for eternity. So the evil will not. All right. Any other comments about the pure in heart?
Layne, I heard somebody say one time they were talking about how we see God in our brothers and sisters, and
Yeah.
when we see them serving and see that, like, part of that is the Holy Spirit, the Spirit that dwells within. I think sometimes we can see God
That's right.
in how, I don't know how to say it, maybe in how the Spirit is leading them to do certain things. It's just, I think part of it is seeing God in that way. If that makes, I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know if I
absolutely.
say that right, but.
You know, it's neat too watching, and I guess from my perspective as a preacher, it's neat to watch people make decisions beneficial to the kingdom that is constantly from the human point of view, and we see that we see that in you guys. That is, boy, you talk about seeing God on this earth. That is amazing to witness. We've probably all seen that from time to time, but it is really neat to see. All right. Next beatitude: blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So on this one, we need to be choosing peace. What are the many ways? What are just some of the ways that we can choose peace?
Controlling anger.
So part of it is controlling self, isn't it? So I choose peace when I swallow my pride, when I work on my own anger issues, when I don't respond the way that my humanness wants to respond. Trying to remain silent instead of saying something. That's choosing peace. So there were a couple other statements.
Communicate.
So communication is huge.
Not hitting the other guy that's talking to you.
That's true. Physically choosing peace.
I think humility and humbleness go hand in
Yeah,
hand.
so
It's
the
being selfless, like putting yourself.
That's
first,
right.
Being humble. I think those type of people.
So, yeah.
Make peace.
Yeah, if we are not humble, we are not going to make peace, because we're going to want I'm going to want my way. So humility, I believe, is key here to this.
I think it's also going to the other person that needs it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there is a bit of courage here, isn't there? So that was definitely one of the things I wanted to bring out, was that choosing peace sometimes is not the most comfortable thing. Choosing peace sometimes means that you sit down with somebody in a very uncomfortable situation and try to work through an issue. You don't always get it worked out, but we're choosing peace. Whether the other party will let us or not, we are still choosing to walk down that road. And that's again, we're doing our best to be the peacemaker there in those types of situations. Unfortunately, Amy fortunately, she has to work with that probably daily. So, what else? What other ways?
Bearing with one another.
So sometimes it is just simply bearing with one another. Just go, you know what? That Ashley, he thinks a little different than I do, but you know what? We're okay here, you know. He bears with me and I bear with him. That's good. So there's a lot of different ways that we choose peace, and God obviously wants us to be peacemakers. So there is this, most of what we've addressed here is kind of peace from the physical point of view, from life point of view. But there is also peace from the spiritual point of view. That we need to make sure that we are peacemakers with God. So that includes not only my life, but it also includes me trying to make peace between the guy that I work with and God, the guy I meet at Walmart and God. Matter of fact, this happened today. A fellow that I had lunch with talked with our waiter at Rib Crib, invited him to church. Peacemaker, that's what that is. So that's important, that we choose peace, that we do our best to be peacemakers. Now, as you think about, we could have done this with each one of these. I didn't think about it until later, but as you think about how the first century, think about you being in the crowd in the first century, and Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." What are you going to be thinking as you hear Jesus say that?
Maybe freedom from the Romans.
Not only, yeah. So freedom from the Romans. Where else was there kind of pressure coming down on the Jews?
Scribes and Pharisees.
Yeah. So you got this religious elite that is breathing down your neck. You got the Romans breathing down your neck. And here all of a sudden Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Does that mean he wants me to make peace with the Romans? Surely that's... So you can see there would have been a little bit of conflict there. And maybe even a little bit of, I don't know about this guy, as Jesus taught some of these things.
Well, and the ancient history, the wars and the the bloodshed was just out of this world.
Yeah, and as you run this idea backwards, and you take it into to the history that they knew of, the Jews were a warring group. I mean, throughout that lineage of the Jews, they literally wiped out hundreds of nations, and probably in the millions of people. That's hard for us to take hold of. But you can see why this was a very powerful teaching here. Blessed are the peacemakers. We're kind of a warring nation, you know, and they maybe were able to sense this change that was coming.
And Layne, their history, that warring was many times directed by God.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, it was God directed.
They felt God led.
Yeah. And I think they misunderstood what that was all about. God was making a nation that would be holy for them to live in. It really had nothing to do with war in that sense. So God was purifying. And I don't know that they understood that. But it was directed by God, most of it.
You think they do today? The Jews believe that they don't believe in Christ. They're killing the people around them.
I know.
So
yeah, things have not changed. We're running around this tree yet again, and will until the Lord comes. I don't think things will change until He gets here. You know, only those who choose peace can become true sons of God, and that's what He says here. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. So it's only those who are able to obtain peace, again, through Jesus Christ, nothing in and of ourselves, that we are able to become the true sons. So, you know, this is, again, a pretty important idea. All right, number 8, choose the kingdom first. Verse 10, blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you falsely and say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is in heaven, and it is great, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So we think about choosing the kingdom first. Again, I would like for you to consider being a Jew and hearing this, what Jesus just said. Who would come to mind if you were in the first century when Jesus was talking about these things? Okay, so the Roman persecution won't come till later. This is going to play a role in the church later as well. And the Romans were persecuting them to a certain extent because they were Jews. But what else is going to come to the Jewish mind? Ma'am?
Pharisees.
So the Pharisees also persecuting them. Who else? Thinking of one other group.
Christians.
So even before, go back to Hebrews chapter 11. Remember in Hebrews chapter 11, all those guys, that list of the faithful. Let's flip over there real quick. I didn't mean to throw you all a curveball. I threw you a curveball.
Back to Egypt.
All right, so go down to verse 32 of Hebrews 11. And what more shall I say, for time will fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David, Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, not accepting their release so that they might obtain a better resurrection. Others experienced mockings and scourgings, yes, chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were tempted. They were put to death with the sword. They went about in sheepskins, goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and ill-treated, men of whom the world was not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the grounds. I tell you, a lot of those prophets, a lot of those men of God, especially during the years of the minor prophets, really kind of starting with Elijah and Elisha, those guys were persecuted because of righteousness, because they chose to be a spokesman for God. And I would suggest to you that as the Jews heard this, they would have been very fluent in the law and the prophets. And so as Jesus talks about that, I have no doubt that they were remembering all of the stories, all the accounts that they've been told, probably growing up, about all of the prophets of God that had been killed. And now Jesus has now brought that and dropped it in their laps. And now blessed are you. And choose righteousness. Choose the kingdom here. And you're going to get it. You'll be going through the same thing that the prophets were. So I think this really resonated with them as they thought about some of these things. Let's take a look at these two quick verses. 1 Peter 4. All right, 1 Peter 4, down verse 14. Peter will say, if you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. Make sure that none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, or evildoer, or a troublesome meddler. But if anyone suffers as a Christian, he is not to be ashamed, but is to glorify God in his name. So Peter grabs that teaching from the Sermon on the Mount and brings it forward into the church and say this, you guys are going to experience the same thing. Not the same thing that the first century church did, the same thing that the prophets of old had suffered. And also let's look over at 2 Corinthians 4. Second Corinthians 4, verse 16. This is a nice verse that kind of puts this in perspective. Therefore we do not lose heart, but though our outward man is decaying, our inward man is being renewed day by day. For momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. While we look not at things which are seen, but at things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporal, the things which are not seen are eternal. So again, the challenge to choose the kingdom and put the kingdom first. The world is not gonna like us, not gonna accept our faith, not gonna accept the positions, the stands that we stand, as we've been looking at from the book of Daniel. The world is not gonna like that. And so just a very beautiful challenge here from this last beatitude. The righteousness that Jesus talks about here, about this persecution, this righteousness brings us eternal rewards. Now, there's a couple of things well, before we look at some concluding statements, anything else about this 8th beatitude here?
There is only 8, aren't there?
Yeah, they're just these 8.
Yeah.
Well, there might be 9 or 10 depending on how you divide them up. But I divided them up into 8. Now, here's something I thought was interesting. I don't always notice these kinds of things. I usually need some help to notice. So I was reading a commentary this afternoon, and a guy mentioned this, and I just kind of shook my head, and I don't know why I never noticed this before. But notice the bookends on the Sermon on the Mount. And we've talked about bookends before in different passages. The Sermon on the Mount has 2 bookends. In 5:3, as he starts, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And you go to the other end, chapter 5, verse 12, rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. It's interesting that this set of Beatitudes is all about heaven. Now, yes, it is about the way that we live, and it is about the choices that we make. But every one of these deals with heaven. And he emphasizes that at the beginning and at the end. I think to kind of grab our attention. This is about heaven. This is the lifestyle that we must choose to be pleasing to God and have heaven as our eternal home. These are not optional. These are not optional characteristics here. This is the way that we need to live. Once again, Jesus is speaking spiritually, and we often hear his teaching from a physical point of view. Obviously, I think for each one of these, there is physical application to these. But Jesus' main thrust here is spiritual in nature, and it is about our eternal home. So, and that's going to set the tone for the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. Because the Sermon on the Mount, again, and I think I mentioned this last week as well, although we take a look at it in parts so we kind of digest it, the Sermon on the Mount is one story. And it really needs to be taken a look at holistically. Jesus, what are you trying to teach me? And I believe he captures it here as it begins. He is teaching us about our journey to heaven. And so, just one of those things that we keep in mind. And it's about the choices that we make. So Jesus will do this over and over. Yes, ma'am?
Excuse me, at the end of Matthew chapter 7.
Yes.
It says, if you do these things, you'll be like the man who built his house upon a rock.
That's right.
And if you don't, you'll be like the man who built his house upon sand.
Exactly right. And so Jesus will conclude that as we get to chapter 7. That's right. Russell, did you? Yeah.
Would all of those people listening to that, would they have known what he was talking about as far as eternity in heaven?
I doubt it.
Do you know what word was used, what the word heaven in this sermon, what it would have said to them, what it actually literally would have said? He used the word heaven probably.
I would have to look that back up. I have looked that up before, Russ, but I don't remember for sure what it was. They had a concept of heaven, but I don't believe it is as robust as ours is.
You know, they always talked about going into, what was the term where they go into the dirt when they're buried?
Sheol.
Sheol.
So yeah, they believed in
when that changed in their mind.
Yeah. Well, I believe it was through the church that God was able to kind of get that corner turned. They believed in an afterlife. They believed in maybe not all of them. Some of them did believe in a resurrection. Even the Sadducees. So that's a great question, one I would need to go back and do a little bit more research on.
Well, Layne, in Matthew, like you said, he was talking to the Jews.
Right.
And, you know, they were on the last part of the fulfillment of the prophecy, you know, then you will have your land.
That's right.
He's not talking about land, he's talking about something greater.
That's right.
And he's trying to roll this around in their heads so they'll see, this is not my final home.
That's right.
There's something after this.
And you know, even the apostles don't get this until after the resurrection.
Right.
This is all going to be a mystery to them. But I think as they go back and think through this stuff, and perhaps even as they read through Matthew's gospel, I bet the light bulbs were coming on.
So this is the transition.
Oh, absolutely.
Physical and spiritual.
That's right. Yeah, this is a huge transition. That's right. Through this, you know, this is the climax of history that we're reading about right here. And so it's a very powerful sermon because it is ushering in a new age. And he's tying it to the previous one as he ushers in the new one. And he's trying to coax these Jews along. Come on, guys, this is about your eternal home here. It's not about the promised land. It's not about a physical kingdom.
Even the priests didn't.
Oh yeah, very few. There were a few that got it, but not very many. Not very many. One other interesting thing I wanted to mention about the Beatitudes. We mentioned this kind of earlier, but although these can be looked at individually, they need to be considered collectively. In other words, what lesson is Jesus teaching here? It's like an 8-point sermon here. Heaven, 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 heaven. Be pure. Be peacemakers. Because this is the attitude that will get you to heaven. That's kind of the theme here of kind of what we might consider part 1 of this amazing sermon as Jesus jumps in here with these Jews. As we move into the next topic, which is going to flow, keep in mind that this sermon is not a shotgun blast of Jesus' greatest hits. That's sometimes how we study the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? That is not what this is. This isn't the greatest hits album of Jesus. This is a continuous thread of what God wants from His people. Okay? It's a continuous thought. So the next section, when he talks about salt and light, it's a continuation of the Beatitudes. So he says, here's the attitude that you need. And if we have this attitude, then Jesus will say in Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 13, then what? You are the salt of the earth. Why are we salt of the earth? Because we are living the way that God wants us to live. We are living as those whose citizenship is in heaven. We're not living like the rest of the world. So you are the salt of the earth. If the salt has become tasteless, now who might he be referring to right there? Pharisees. He's not pointing fingers here, but you can tell. Okay, we get you. If the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. So what's Jesus saying right here about this transition? What's fixing to happen? There's some things that are fixing to be thrown out and trampled down because they're no longer good for anything. So maybe the Pharisees had a job to do. Maybe God allowed them to do some things. But it's fixing to be over for them in just a few short years. We're not going to read about Pharisees anymore. They're going to be cast out. Because why? They lost their saltiness. Had they stayed with the Beatitudes and lived that way, God might have been able to use them even greater. Okay, so again, just think about the flow as we go through. Verse 14. If we have these Beatitudes, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. You remember as God brings about the Jewish nation back with Moses, do you remember what he tells them? There's a phrase that God will tell the children of Israel. You will be a light to the world. God will tell them that back in the book of Genesis. I want you to be a light to the world. That was their job since the creation of the Jewish nation. And they've lost. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. That's what the plan was. Nor does anyone light a lamp, put it under a basket, but they put it on a lampstand, and it gives light to all those who are in the house. God didn't make the Jewish nation to be hidden, to hide in the caves. He put them up on the 7 mountains of Jerusalem so the world could see them and come to the light. So, again, they've lost the way to live, the attitudes. God is saying, here was my intent for you. So, verses 13 through 15, how are we then salt of the earth? How are we light of the world?
Proper lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way we live. People will see us. If we do not live the life described in the Beatitudes, what consequence does Jesus say we're going to suffer? We're going to be thrown out and trampled. So, again, a very powerful lesson, very powerful application there. How does that tie into heaven? Fairly significant, doesn't it? So, again, these Beatitudes for us are huge. We look at verse 16. Let your light so shine before men. What light? The light of the Beatitudes. Again, this is not a disconnect. Is this a concluding thought as he continues here? Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Tied it back into heaven, didn't he? Tied it back into the way that we live. Tied it back into the Beatitudes. We are salt and light because of the way that we live, the way that we talk, the way that we behave, the way that we act and react in all situations. And we let our light shine before men, not so God will see us, or so that men will see us, but so that men will see God in us. When they see us, they will know. You are weird people. And that's what we want them to think. That's what we want them to think. We want them to notice that we are different. So if you choose to live by this standard, you will be salt and light. Your Father in heaven will be glorified. It's a simple concept. You know, several years ago, and I'm not real sure who started this, but it even started back before the merge. In the summertime, we had our little kids do a summer service thing. What was that summer? Summer service. And this was one of the verses that really stood out to me that our young people were doing, because they would get out and they would just do different things in the community. I remember one of the kind of neat things they did. They bought a bunch of bottled water and iced them down. And on a 100-degree day in the middle of the summer, they drove around town and gave water bottles to those that were working and just said, "Hey, have a good day. And they had Church of Christ on the band. Hey, we're with the Church of Christ. Just shining, just being light. Anyway, it was a neat several-year activity, and but it kind of stemmed from this particular verse about letting the light shine. What application then can we draw for today from this first section? Probably covered most of that, but anything else stand out, James?
Well, the 8 points, it's not a checklist.
That's right, exactly right.
It's a way of life, and they were struggling to understand this. And with what the Pharisees and scribes were telling them,
yeah,
they were saying, wait a minute, it doesn't fit. And then these last 2 verses are telling them, you're going to have to be the one that does the studying, that does understand the concepts, because you are the salt, you are the light. It may not be that Pharisee, it may not be that scribe who's telling you these things. Probably
not going to be. Matter of fact, in the next section, which we are not going to get to tonight because I blab too much. But I have class ready for next week. One other thing, because we only got 2 minutes left. One other thing, and we've mentioned this several times already, but I want to emphasize this because it's going to be emphasized as we go forward. How is the first section connected to the old law? Is this a total disconnect from what God intended in the old law? No. This is exactly what God intended with the old law. And that's what Jesus will say in Matthew chapter 5. You have heard it said, but I say do this. Jesus is saying the intent of God all along has been this set of Beatitudes, and you've totally missed it. So choose this. Let's get back on track and let's go. So this first section is directly connected to the old law and to what they have not really been taught, although they should have been taught this. This was the intent of the old law. The old law was not this checklist that they now had in their minds. The checklist was here, or the law was, here is how you live to please me. So live this way. Choose these things. And they've missed it.
Well, from the time that God called them out of Egypt, he said, I've called you out to be my people.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's exactly what this is. I want you to be my people. Think like me. Behave like me. Have my attitudes. And they have missed it. So he is calling them back to this.
Think of the Jews, though, in their whole history, God had always stepped in and wiped out anybody that opposed them. This was their mindset, not being nice to the enemy and
I know.
them. They were, God will come and we'll kill them all, no problem. That's what they had been doing for 1,000 years.
That's right.
So I kind of sympathize a little bit with them. This was a big change.
They stumbled over the stumbling stone. And that's exactly what the Apostle Paul was saying. And that's exactly what they did. All right, so we will pick up with verse 17, which is kind of the beginning of the next section. It's a good place for us to finish, actually. And we'll pick back up on that in just a minute. Matt Moss, would you dismiss us in prayer, please?
Lord, we thank you for the beautiful day. We thank you for the opportunity to get together with your church and to draw strength from one another, but to glorify you today. Help us carry that into our week. Help us to be these things that we've studied tonight. Help us to be the light in this community, to represent you, to be your pastor. Be with those who are sick and sad. Help us to always look to serve one another. Through Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thanks.
Yep.